Chapter 5. Listen to all the ways I'm trying to communicate. You can't rush art. Bryce turned his bottomless blue eyes on his first-grade teacher and delivered this zinger as she hustled the class to clean up their paints. Quick, quick, quick! It's time for music. Brushes in the sink. Line up at the door. Let's go. Bryce had just discovered the wonder of mixing orange and green paint to make brown for his version of Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and he didn't appreciate the hurry-scurry. His teacher couldn't wait to repeat his remark to me because, of course, he is right. What she didn't know was that he lifted the response wholesale, words, inflection, and tempo, right out of Toy Story 2. Bryce had a breathtaking command of delayed echolalia. When his own limited vocabulary failed him, he had split-second retrieval of functional responses from the encyclopedic stash of movie scripts stored on the hard drive of his brain. Echolalia is a verbal behavior common in autism, wherein the child repeats chunks of language that he has heard uttered by others. Echolalia can be immediate. Child echoes something that has just been said to or near him. Delayed. Child repeats something he's heard in recent, mid, or distant past. Or perseverative. Child repeats the same phrase or question over and over again. For many parents, count me as one, echolalia incites a piercing sense of panic that foments when exchanges of fact, feeling, and thought cannot flow freely among ourselves, our child, and the rest of the world. At the time of the Can't Rush Art incident, 90% of Bryce's speech was delayed echolalia. He employed it so skillfully that it was largely undetectable to anyone but our family. Still, I was desperate to squash it. A common, understandable, but misguided desire for parents in my position. Because the speech isn't spontaneous, it can seem like, since we're quoting movies, what we've got here is failure to communicate. Cool Hand Luke, 1967. Echolalic speech often doesn't seem to have any relevance to what's happening at the moment, although to the child, it does. He may be 3 or 4 associative links ahead of you, making it your tricky but necessary job to discover the correlation. Echolalia is only one aspect of language development, albeit one that generates considerable emotion in parents. We want it gone. I have felt with a mother's heart, as you may be feeling, the urgency to have my child produce normal language, the kind that erases some of the stark difference between him and his age peers. In that urgency, we must not lose sight of the fact that while he has yet to develop basic vocabulary and the skills involved with generative speech, he still needs a way to communicate his needs, fears, and wants. If you take away only one thing from this chapter, let it be this. Having a means of functional communication, whatever it may be, is essential to any child, but more so to the child with autism. If your child cannot get her needs met and fears quelled, her world and yours can be a horrid place. Without functional communication, expect to see her frustration and fear play out in behavior as she tries to let you know by the only means available to her that things are not as they should be for her. Once she is comfortable that she can communicate regardless of where she is between calm and calamity, and that you will listen and hear her regardless of her mode of communication, she can begin to build an understanding of all facets of communication, including the ones that go beyond mere vocabulary. The typical early words and petite first sentences of childhood seem so simple on the surface. You want your child to say mama and doggy, then I want juice and can I play and I love you. But oh, how much is going on in those simple phrases. Speech, the physical ability to produce vocal sounds, is only the beginning component of language, putting words together in a way that conveys meaning to others. Language alone doesn't create conversation, establishing social contact with others using verbal and nonverbal communication. As a baby, your child made his needs and moods known in nonverbal ways. Most children progress to uttering words, then stringing those words together into phrases and sentences. As they grow, their language becomes much more than a tool for slapping labels on items, feelings, and actions. It becomes a means to express their thoughts and emotions and to interact with others socially. The social use of language, called pragmatics, is the synergistic brew of words, gestures, facial expressions, and social understanding we use, often unconsciously or instinctively, to communicate with each other. At any one or many points along this developmental timeline, autism can hinder your child's understanding of how these tools work to connect us or to separate us. In Chapter 8, we'll further explore the social aspects of conversation, the everything else beyond our words that helps us relate to others. I can never forget how Bryce's early struggles with speech challenged his efforts to socialize, impacted his emotional health, and obscured his cognitive capabilities. Fortunately, two things happened concurrently that eased my mind enough that I could back off and let him work through his echolalia in his own way and at his own pace. First, I read an article by a young man with autism, 20 years old, successfully making his way through a 4-year college. He described how he still employed echolalia in his everyday social communication, and that he alone knew it. I thought, maybe the stress I'm reaping on this issue isn't warranted. I called in our district autism specialist. She offered wise and memorable advice. I know you want to stamp this out, but don't. Don't try to go around, go through it. I promise you it will not last forever, but give him the time he needs to work through it. Though I didn't know the word for it at the time, Bryce was a Gestalt learner. Gestalt is a German word that means whole or complete. Gestalt learners take experiences as one piece, without being able to see the individual components. Many children with autism learn language in this manner, absorbing it in chunks rather than as individual words. As opposed to Gestalt, we call word-by-word learning analytic. It may seem as though analytic language learners are more typical in the population than Gestalt learners. In fact, many children with autism, particularly Asperger's, are analytic learners who can easily associate meaning with individual words. Both analytic and Gestalt are legitimate, normal learning styles. A speech therapist can guide your child through echolalia and other parts of language and communication development, including the process of learning to break apart gestalts and reconstruct the smaller pieces into spontaneous speech. As you embark upon therapy, remember that each child will have a unique response pattern. There's no correct timetable, and sometimes progress may look like regression. If your child spouts lengthy, eloquent scripts, his learning to generate simple sentences of his own may temporarily sound toddler-esque. It's not. It's healthy language development. In the meantime, it may ease your anxiety about your child's echolalia if you take time to notice how he uses it. Chances are he isn't just playing files in his head, he's using it as a means of communication that makes sense to him. His echolalia may be functional and interactive in a number of ways. Listen and note. See if he might use it to 1. Reciprocate conversation. Respond where he knows an exchange is expected. 2. Ask for or request something, either an object or someone's attention. 3. Offer information or opinion. 4. Protest or deny the actions or requests of others. 5. Give instructions or directives. 6. Put a name or a label to an item, activity, or place. As a fourth grader, Bryce sat for the usual round of triennial standardized testing, the results of which decreed his vocabulary to be severely subpar. This stunned me. Coming from 3-word phrases at age 4 and 90% echolalic speech at age 6, I marveled at his accomplishments with the spoken word by age 10, which included speaking with ease in front of groups. I asked to see the test material. Among other things, he had incorrectly identified the words cactus and violin. This brought my hackles up. Those words represented things that he seldom, if ever, encountered in his daily life, his reading, or his movie viewing. And he had gotten the context correct, identifying the cactus as a desert plant and the violin as a music player. The rigidity of the testing infuriated me, but it did make me realize how, in listening to and responding to him, I automatically decoded the irregular language in both his spontaneous and echolalic speech. I didn't want to spend my conversational time with him correcting grammar and syntax, so I did the translation in my head and continued to exchange thoughts with him uninterrupted. In one sense, I was doing the right thing, validating his means of functional communication and, with it, his self-image. But I took the test results as a wake-up call that I needed to do more everyday feeding in of language as well as checking for comprehension in both the spoken and written word. For instance, we came across this passage in a story. He ripped the handbag from her grasp. Bryce looked blank, so we stopped and I went over the words rip, grasp, and handbag. "Oh," he said, exasperated, "he stole her purse. Why doesn't it just say that? He stole her purse." This led to a discussion of how words, like colors, come in many shades, and how varying our words can make a story colorful. We had a good time coming up with a long and comical list of ways to say big: large, huge, gigantic, immense, enormous, whopping, humongous, colossal, and on and on. It was a light bulb moment for both of us. He hadn't thought of words that way, and I hadn't thought of offering them so. This reinforced one of the first and most elemental pieces of advice Bryce's speech therapist had given us, that we work hard to maintain a language-rich environment around him. A child not frequently exposed to other speaking people will develop language much more slowly. In particular, if your child is in a self-contained special education classroom, she may not have much exposure to typically developing kids speak. Alongside using visual supports for our kids with emerging speech, we delve into that in Chapter 6, we must surround them with words and language. Talk out the thoughts in your head, verbalize what you are doing and why. Look at your child when you speak to him, and answer him every time he speaks to you or otherwise attempts to communicate, letting him know you value everything he has to say, regardless of whether you understand him. Read to him, tell him stories, sing to him. Singing is speech, So if your child learns songs easily, use that strength to enhance his language skills. Talk about any new words in the song he may not understand. Distinguish nonsense words from real words. Putting your child on the spot to respond in words or engage in conversation can be very stressful for him. So help ease that performance anxiety by putting manageable parameters on verbal exchanges. Try this 2-minute to 2-minute rule. Tell him you'd like to hear about his day at school, his favorite toy or book, the dog, or any subject that interests him. If he's willing, give him 2 minutes to gather his thoughts, then watch, listen, and respond to him for 2 minutes. In family conversation, learn to pause for responses. Many families chat and banter at a rapid-fire pace that leaves the child with autism unable to keep up. To slow the overall pace of exchanges and give your child a better chance to participate, wait a few seconds before responding. Use your words. As you push your child or student toward verbal communication, how many times have you prompted him to do this, and with how many different inflections? One day encouraging, gently coaxing, the next day stern with a shot of frustration, another day weary and pleading. All the words your child has may not be enough to make his needs, wants, thoughts, and ideas known. She may have learned a word, but producing it requires added layers of processing and skill. Articulating her thoughts and feelings may be easy one day, impossible the next when sensory issues amplify and interfere, or when your expectation that she maintain certain behaviors depletes all the energy she can muster. Think you know how it feels to be forced to multitask under pressure? Your child or student's list includes trying to self-regulate multiple hyper or hypoactive senses simultaneously, intercept and interpret visual and auditory clues and cues floating around, employ and act upon appropriate social thinking, and then produce language as well. Use your words is a worthy goal, as speech is the ultimate portable, standalone, all-terrain, all-hours, all-weather communication device. But on the way to achieving any degree of that goal, it is compulsory that we acknowledge all our child or student's attempts to communicate, in whatever form the message comes. And after investing so much heartfelt effort in helping our children find their words, you may find that a great irony of the 21st century sneaks in to ambush you. Without ongoing attention, that language-rich environment can slip away, disappearing into the crevices of technology and changing culture. Even when our kids do achieve the ability to speak, reciprocal speech of any duration may be a hard-won learned skill. The essential component of any learned skill is practice, practice, and more practice. And that is why a sad realization came to me during an ordinary morning round of errands, one poignant and worrisome reason why reciprocal speech remains a challenge for our kids. We no longer talk to the people in our immediate community. My morning was a potent example. I got cash from an ATM. I didn't talk to a bank teller. I scanned my groceries through the self-checkout line. I didn't talk to a checker. Our library has automated checkout. I didn't talk to the librarian. I mailed a package at the automated postal center without talking to a clerk. I'd bypassed at least half a dozen of what, not so long ago, would have been opportunities for human interaction. Wall Street Journal publisher Les Hinton has been quoted as saying that the scarcest resource of the 21st century, after water and food and all of that, will be human attention. A language-rich environment? More like a language-depleted landscape. Automation, electronic communication, and social media have a legitimate, immutable place in our culture. But if we value the stimulation, joy, and functionality of reciprocal speech, conversation, we must teach our children, by example, to come out from behind their computer and phone screens and practice talking to others. Our speech therapist's advice about creating a language-rich environment came at a time when the use of language hadn't yet been appropriated by electronics, when being conversational included vocal inflections, facial expression, and body language. Like Skype without the screen. Of the many parent-teen conflicts my husband and I expected to face, we never dreamed we'd be considered counterculture because we wanted our children to speak to other humans. Sooner or later, our kids will have to talk to the people in their community because some relationships cannot be relegated to a screen. The doctor, the dentist, the bus driver, the hairstylist, the flight attendant, the policeman, the firefighter, the clergy, the lifeguard, the piano teacher, the coach, the lawyer, the judge. It will happen if we help our children expand their communication skills by respecting their current abilities and providing a variety of means to convey wants, needs, thoughts, feelings, and ideas under all circumstances. We've then opened a door to a place where they can experience conversation as camaraderie rather than combat, to a place where genuine communication connects us all. Chapter 6